Greetings and welcome back to Module 10. In this video, we're going to talk about data validation, or ways to keep prying eyes and prying hands out of your stuff.
So Chapter 10, when I first started looking at it, it's like, boy, this seems like a hodgepodge of things that were just left over at the end of the semester. But when I started thinking more about it, it's actually lent itself more to building an application and disseminating that application throughout an organization. So think about the spreadsheets you've made so far this semester. If they work fine for you and they do what you would want, but more often than not, you're going to be in a position in your organization where you make the spreadsheet and then disseminate it to your team or to others to use, so it ends up in somebody else's hands. Well, that's the worst thing a developer can dream of, is somebody taking their work of art and messing it up. So we're going to show you some of the different points of Excel from an application perspective, and you being the application developers and letting your team or others use the product of your work. So first off, one of the more common things that I found, I wish I'd known this years ago, because I was in charge of developing a spreadsheet for my department, and you'd hand it off to somebody, and before you knew it, it was broken. They'd gone in and changed the formulas to what they thought they were supposed to be, or they'd put in wrong data, or all kinds of stuff. What we've got here, this is actually your file from the assignment 10. What it is, it's just 10 employees, their social security numbers, what's their marital status, what their tax status is, number of allowances on their tax form, insurance plan, their pay rate, and then sometimes there'll be some formulas in here, like the overtime rate is supposed to be the pay rate times 1.5. And then how many hours did they work during a 2-week period, and what the gross pay is, and then what the 401k deduction would be out of that, and the taxable wages, health insurance, and then some miscellaneous notes and comments out here on the end. Ideally, this would be for an HR department, a list of your employees and all the ways to calculate their salaries and their taxable tax status and their marital status, some other HR-related things. If we look at marital status, we see married, single, M, single, married, divorced, single, married. So allowing people to type in anything that they want, you're going to get anything that they feel like, whatever works for them. What would be the downside of having a list of employees, and some are married and some have M, and maybe some are single and some have S? What's the big deal? Why is that a bad thing? You can't categorize them. If you were going to make a pivot table out of this, so let's highlight the data and go insert a pivot table. Wonder if I delete those rows. Destination. Oh. There we go. So maybe I want gross pay and by marital status, and I put that in there. It's like, okay, well now I've got to take into account M and married in order to add those two together to find out what the deal, what the pay is. So if your data is dirty, it's going to be very hard to summarize it and work with it and generate reports. So 2 ways you can look at it. Now that it's in there, you can fix it, or you can, better yet, prevent the bad data from getting in there in the first place. So if you've got a few valid marital statuses, single, married, divorced, widowed, and I want to keep people from entering anything besides those exact 4 things, you can add to any cell or range of cells what's referred to as data validation. So if I come over here to data, there's the data validation tool here, and click on, go figure, data validation. So first off, go into this, there's 3 tabs: settings, input message, and error alert. So for error alert, I'm going to show you 3 different ones and show you how the differences between them. But for your homework, you want them all to set to this stop, which basically says, hey, this is an error. You can't do anything but this. So I'm going to make a little stop sign here. Error. Select one of the valid choices, dummy. And then for the settings, by default, every cell in the whole page is set to any value. It'll accept anything at this point. But I want to accept just a list, and I want an in-cell drop-down list. And I'm going to, for the source, I'm going to define the source as these 4 cells. And then for input message, I'll show you what this is. I'll just call it input message, and please select one of the following. Hit OK.
So I set my data validation on that cell down in B19, but I should have put it up here. So I'm wondering, can I take that data validation and copy it, and then come up here and highlight it, and I'm going to do a paste special, and I wonder if validation is here. Yeah, I just want the validation rules. So I pasted all those validation rules into those cells. So I think we're good to go here.
So now that I've got that validation here, I can pick each one, and if I hold my mouse, click on it, it says, there's our input message, please select one of the following. If I choose to ignore that and type in like the letter Q, it'll let me type in something, but as soon as I hit enter, whatever you typed in into the error message pops up in this error message. Error! Select one of the valid choices, dummy. So yeah, a little harsh, judgmental. That's how you create a data validation. Now that I've got the validation rule set for those cells, if I go over here to data validation and say circle all the invalid ones, it'll then come in and circle all the ones that don't meet the criteria of the rule. So that's a very handy way. Now this is pretty simple. There's only 9 or 10 employees, but if you had thousands, this is a big deal. All right, so let's show you another example. We'll do it again on the next column. So I'm going to correctly highlight the cells that I want the data validation on and create another data validation. And I'm going to, instead of a stop sign, I'm going to put a warning. Now again, for your homework, I want you to use stop signs, but just to demonstrate what all the choices are. So let's see, warning, Will Robinson. Sorry, you guys aren't old enough to remember that. This is a message, I don't know, warning message here. And then for input message, you can put, anything you want, X and Y. And then for the settings, so I could do a list again, but you could also do whole number, decimal, a list. It has to be a particular date, it has to be a particular time, it has to be a chunk of text with a given length. Like maybe you're putting in a zip code and you want to make sure that you put in all 5 digits of the zip code. You can force that. Or custom, which lets you create all kinds of crazy masks to validate everything to the right level there. So I'm going to create another list. This time, instead of highlighting those 2 cells, which I could do, the tax status is supposed to be either single or married. You can either highlight some cells, or if you don't want to put junk in cells just to create your validation list, you can put the values in here in the source and just call it, married, comma, single. You don't have to put them in quotations, but you do have to separate the chunks of text by a comma. It is not case sensitive, I don't think. But notice this is the warning, so it's not the red stop sign, it's a warning. So watch what happens when we come in here. Okay, yay, it highlighted all the defective data. And there's my married single. Let me choose single warning message here. Continue. So it is case sensitive. And if you say yes, it will allow it in. So I can now put in bad data in here, and it'll warn you and say, hey, do you really want to? It's like, yeah, I do. It's like, okay, well, it will let you put in the bad data. I can't imagine why you'd ever want this option, but you can do it. You're about to mess up my spreadsheet, but that's okay. It's like, well, then why bother? Let's do another one on this column here, allowances. So I'm going to go to data validation, So if you've ever filled out a tax form, this is usually a number between 0 and I don't know what the maximum value for number of deductions you can claim on your W-4. I think it's probably 10 or something. We'll just say it's 10. I don't know what the maximum value would be, but data validation. Let's pick the last choice here. It's informational only. Hey. This should be a number between 0 and 10. Settings, I want it to be a whole number between the minimum of 0 and the maximum of 10. Hit OK. And let's see, let's highlight any that break the rule. This selection contains some cells without data validation settings. Do you want to extend the data validation to these cells? So evidently when I made the original cell or the original data validation, I only picked one of the cells. So it's asking me, do I want to propagate that out to all 10? It's like, hey, yeah, you're smarter than me, let's go for it. So click on that. Yeah, I want that rule with that. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so now it caught the bad data. And I can come in here and put in 12, and it said this should be a number between 0 and 10. It's like, okay, thanks. So it's even less of a protection against bad data creeping into your spreadsheet. The extra credit assignment 10, only use the stop. This is just to show you some of the cool stuff that Excel can do. Ooh, ah. All right, so we can correct that. I mean, we could even put in a letter Q and it'll let you. It's like, really? Okay, thanks. All right, so that is the different levels of data validation.
All right, so that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll learn about other ways to protect your work.